White officer spits on black man, then learns he's the new police chief. Keep watching to find out what happens next. Where are you watching our videos? Drop your location in the comment below. Let's begin. Officer Jack drove his squad car slowly, scanning every corner like a hawk. His eyes landed on an old, dusty car rolling through the intersection. The driver, a black man, sat straight, his hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel. Jack didn't like it. He flipped on his siren and pulled the car over. Stepping out, he adjusted his belt, his boots crunching on the gravel as he approached. The driver rolled down his window. "License and registration," Jack demanded. The man nodded, pulling his wallet out slowly. "Here you go, officer. My name's Marcus. Just moved here." Jack cut him off. "I didn't ask for your life story. What are you doing in this neighborhood?" Marcus stayed calm. "Driving home. Just got groceries." Jack's eyes narrowed. "Groceries in this part of town? You don't belong here." "I don't want trouble," Marcus replied. "Too late for that," Jack barked. He stepped closer, peering into the car. "What are you hiding?" "Nothing." "Feel free to check," Marcus said, his voice steady. Jack didn't like the tone. It wasn't defiant, but it wasn't scared either. That annoyed him. "Out of the car," Jack ordered. Marcus stepped out, keeping his hands visible. Jack shoved him against the car, frisking him roughly. A couple of people stopped to watch from a distance. "Something funny," Jack growled at the onlookers. They quickly walked away. "I'm not here to make trouble," Marcus repeated softly. "You think you're better than me," Jack hissed. His voice was low, but sharp as a knife. He didn't wait for an answer. Before Marcus could react, Jack spat in his face. The street went silent. Marcus froze, his fists clenching at his sides. He slowly wiped his face and locked eyes with Jack. His voice was low but steady. "I hope you don't regret this." Jack stepped back, smirking. "Get out of here before I find a reason to bring you in." Marcus stared at him for a moment, then got into his car and drove off. Jack watched him leave, feeling a surge of power. But deep down, a small flicker of unease stirred in his chest. The next morning, the town buzzed with news. People whispered in cafes, at gas stations, and along the sidewalks. A new chief of police had been announced. Nobody saw it coming, and everyone had questions. Jack strolled into the station, coffee in hand, unaware of the storm brewing. He noticed officers huddled in small groups, their voices hushed. They glanced at him but said nothing. He frowned and walked to his desk. "Morning, Jack," an officer muttered, avoiding eye contact. "What's going on?" Jack asked. The officer shrugged, mumbling something about new leadership. Before Jack could ask more, the captain's voice boomed from the briefing room. "All officers report in immediately." Jack followed the others, his boots echoing in the hallway. He stepped into the room and froze. Standing at the front, wearing a crisp uniform with gold insignias, was Marcus. The man Jack had pulled over. The man he had humiliated. Jack's chest tightened. His coffee slipped from his hand, hitting the floor with a dull splash. "Everyone, meet Marcus Wright, your new chief of police," the captain announced. The room was silent. Marcus surveyed the officers, his face calm. His eyes briefly landed on Jack, but gave no sign of recognition. "It's an honor to serve this community," Marcus began. His voice was steady, confident. "I spent the past few weeks observing our department from the outside. I wanted to understand how we operate, what works, and what doesn't. I'm here to improve things, not just for us, but for the people we serve." Jack's stomach churned. He could feel the stares of his colleagues. Whispers rippled through the room like tiny shocks. Marcus continued, "Change is never easy, but it's necessary. I look forward to reforming our department to better serve everyone. Together, we can make this a place we're proud of." Applause followed, hesitant at first, but growing louder. Jack clapped slowly, his palms damp with sweat. Marcus glanced his way again, his expression unreadable. The meeting ended, and the officers trickled out. Jack tried to blend into the crowd, but he could feel Marcus's presence behind him, like a shadow he couldn't shake. At his desk, Jack couldn't focus. The whispers around him grew louder. "Did you hear what he did?" One officer muttered. "Yeah, can you believe it?" Another replied. Jack didn't have to guess who they were talking about. His jaw tightened. By lunchtime, the station felt different. Officers who usually joked with Jack avoided him. Even his closest buddy gave him a wide berth. "Officer," Marcus said evenly. Jack stood, stiff as a board. "Chief." Marcus extended his hand. Jack hesitated before shaking it. "Good to meet you," Marcus said. His grip was firm, but not aggressive. "Likewise," Jack replied, his voice barely audible. Marcus didn't linger. He moved on to the next officer, as if nothing had happened. But Jack couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus knew. By the end of the day, Jack felt like a stranger in his own station. His colleagues barely spoke to him, their whispers growing louder when he entered a room. That night, as Jack sat alone in his dimly lit kitchen, he replayed the moment in his mind. Marcus's calm eyes, the firm handshake, the unspoken tension. Jack stared at his reflection in the window, his own face pale and lined with worry. He didn't know what Marcus would do next, but one thing was clear: the power dynamic had shifted, and Jack was no longer in control. Marcus wasted no time changing things. He brought in strict rules. Officers had to turn in reports on time. Body cam footage was checked daily. Meetings now focused on training, not small talk. He introduced sensitivity training. It wasn't optional. Everyone had to attend, including Jack. The sessions were quiet. No one joked, no one laughed. Marcus listened more than he spoke, asking tough questions that made people squirm. Jack sat in the back of every session. His jaw clenched as Marcus talked about respect and fairness. Jack wanted to speak up, to defend himself, but words stuck in his throat. The whispers about Jack never stopped. "Think he'll last?" One officer said. "Not if the chief finds out everything," another replied. Jack heard it all, but he said nothing. At night, Jack stayed awake, staring at the ceiling. He felt guilt creeping in. He hated the feeling, but it wouldn't leave. Yet his pride wouldn't let him say what needed to be said. One evening, the radio in Jack's squad car crackled. Shots fired. Hostage situation on 3rd Street. Jack's heart raced as he sped to the scene. Police cars surrounded a small store. Inside, a man held a gun to the clerk's head. He was shouting, his face wild with fear. Marcus arrived moments later. He stepped out of his car, calm and focused. "Who's the lead on this?" Jack stepped forward. "I am." "Good," Marcus said. "Let's end this safely." The two approached the building. Marcus signaled Jack to cover him as he tried to talk to the gunman. "Hey, we don't want anyone to get hurt," Marcus said. His voice was steady. "What's your name?" "Stay back," the gunman shouted. "We're not coming in," Marcus replied. "We just want to help." Jack watched, his hand shaking slightly on his weapon. The gunman's eyes darted between Marcus and Jack. "Put the gun down," Marcus said. The gunman hesitated, but his grip stayed tight. Suddenly, the gunman moved, pointing his weapon toward the door. Jack froze. His mind screamed to act, but his body didn't move. Marcus lunged, grabbing the gunman's arm. The gun went off, shattering a window. In seconds, Marcus disarmed the man and pushed him to the ground. The clerk ran out, unharmed. Officers swarmed the building. Marcus stood, handing the gun to another officer. Jack lowered his weapon, his chest heaving. His hesitation had merely cost a life. Later that night, Marcus called Jack into his office. The room was quiet. Jack stood stiffly as Marcus closed the door. "You hesitated," Marcus said. Jack's stomach dropped. Marcus held up a hand. "I'm not here to shame you. I'm here to talk." Jack stayed silent. I know about your history, Jack, Marcus said. His voice wasn't angry, but firm. I know how you've treated people. And I know what you did to me. Jack's eyes widened. You never said. I didn't have to, Marcus said. But I'll say this now. We can fix this together, or you can leave. But you will never disrespect someone like you did me again. Not here. Not anywhere. Jack looked at the floor. Guilt twisted inside him, heavier than ever. I believe in second chances, Marcus added. But that's up to you. Marcus stood, extending his hand. Jack hesitated, then shook it. For the first time, he saw Marcus not as a threat, but as someone stronger than him, not just in action, but in character. Jack stayed. He didn't know why at first. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was guilt. But something told him he couldn't leave things as they were. He started small. At the next sensitivity training session, Jack didn't sit in the back. He took a seat in the front. When Marcus asked for input, Jack hesitated but finally raised his hand. I've made mistakes, he admitted. I need to do better. The room was silent. Marcus nodded and moved on, but the moment lingered. Jack kept showing up. He started listening during sessions instead of tuning out. He began speaking to officers he usually ignored, trying to understand their perspectives. Slowly, things changed. One day, a young officer named Louis approached Jack. I've seen you in training, Louis said. I respect that you're trying. Jack didn't know what to say. He just nodded, feeling a weight lift slightly. At work, Jack began acting differently. He double-checked his reports. He took extra time on patrols, making sure to treat people fairly. It wasn't easy, and sometimes old habits crept in. But he caught himself. Marcus noticed. He didn't say much, but his nods of approval during meetings meant something. Months passed. The department felt different. Officers seemed more united, the tension easing bit by bit. The town noticed too. People spoke about how the police were becoming more respectful and approachable. Then came the town meeting. It was held in the community center, packed with residents, officers, and local leaders. Marcus stood at the front, addressing the crowd. He spoke about the department's progress and the work still ahead. Jack sat near the back, listening. He felt a tug inside him. He knew what he had to do, but his chest tightened at the thought. Finally, Jack stood. All eyes turned to him. His palms were sweaty, his throat dry, but he forced himself to speak. Chief Wright, Jack began, his voice shaky. I need to say something. Marcus paused, giving him the floor. Jack took a deep breath. When you first came here, I treated you terribly. Not just you, others too. I thought I was doing my job, but I wasn't. I was wrong. The room was so quiet Jack could hear his own breathing. I've been trying to change, Jack continued. And it's because of you. You showed me what real leadership looks like. I'm sorry. To you, to this town, to anyone I've hurt. Jack's voice cracked. He looked down, his face burning. Marcus walked toward him. He extended his hand. Jack stared at it for a moment, then shook it. Thank you, officer, Marcus said. The room erupted in applause. People wiped their eyes, moved by the raw honesty of the moment. That night, the town felt lighter. People spoke of hope and unity. Marcus's leadership had sparked something new, something better. And Jack, he wasn't perfect, but he was trying. For the first time, he felt like a real part of the community he had sworn to protect. Did you enjoy the video? Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.